Welcome and or welcome back to my channel. I'm Hannah Blackwell and today I'm really excited to be bringing you my May wrap up. So I did do a first half of the month wrap up in May, and this second half of the month wrap up is going to be coming to you guys just a little bit late, but that's fine. That is just mom life and busyness and whatnot. But I'm still really excited to talk to you about these books. I actually read 13 books in the second half of May. Plus, I did have one DNF. That makes for a total of 21 books in May plus one DNF, and that's just really good for me, especially, that's definitely the best month I've had so far this year. It's not been the best reading year for me. I had a slump for months, and so that definitely didn't help things, but I'm definitely out of the slump now, which is wonderful, and I'm having a really great time with my reading. And so yeah, I'm excited to talk to you about the books that I read in May. I have a whole lot of filming to do today. Actually, I'm going to be filming a couple of other videos. So I did just finish my coffee and now I'm going to have my Magic Mind for the day. This just is a mental performance shot that makes a huge difference for me. Magic Mind has caffeine from matcha that is slow released, plus it has a ton of vitamins and nutrients that really improve your mental clarity and your stress levels. Don't forget that you can use my code HannahBlackwell20 to get 20% off of your first order or 48% off. That's right, 48% off of your first subscription with Magic Mind. Make sure you click on that link and check out Magic Mind for yourself. So with that taken care of, I'm going to go ahead and get into these books. I've got everything down here on my phone. If you haven't already subscribed, I'd love for you to do so. Don't forget to click the like button if you liked it and comment down below. Let me know what your favorite book was that you read in May. So let's go ahead and get the DNF out of the way, and then from there, I think I'm just going to go chronologically. But I did DNF The Witch Collector by Charissa Weeks. I think I'm pronouncing that right. I did DNF this. I got a little bit in, and honestly, it felt very formulaic. And I really am not a huge fan of fantasy romance that's super formulaic. I've read so much fantasy romance and I want something new. I want something different. And I think this was released like a few years ago, back when maybe it didn't seem as overly formulaic at the time. But for me, this was definitely just something I've read a million times before. And the writing wasn't anything unique or spectacular, so I just didn't feel the need to continue. I just don't think it's for me, and that's just fine. Okay, so let's start with the first book that I read in the second half of May, and that was To Ravish a Rogue by C.M. Nascasta. This was a monster romance that is inspired by Joanna Lindsey's Gentle Rogue, which is a historical romance. It's like a pirate historical romance. So this is inspired by that. This is by C.M. Nascasta, but it's a monster romance, and I found this book to be hilarious. I give it 4 stars. This was just, it was a fun time. It's definitely a bit out there. This is the author that wrote Morning Glory Milking Farm, and this is a little bit more kooky than that. So if that gives you an idea of anything, this was quite kooky, but I found it to be hilarious. There was some things that happened in here that had me laughing out loud. It's definitely not the kind of romance that you want to be taking too seriously. The next book I read was When a Scot Ties a Knot by Tessa Dare. I gave this book 5 stars. I loved this. I think I've only read books from 2 different series by her, but between the newer series, When Girl Meets Duke, and this Castles Ever After series, I much prefer the Castles Ever After series. Even though I love the Girl Meets Duke series too, I really enjoyed those books. I don't know, something extra special about this series, and this was no different. So we have a blue stocking heroine. She's really smart. She sketches insects and animals and studies them, and so she's really into like biology and naturalism, and she lives by herself in this castle because when she was younger, she basically made up a story that she was in love with this soldier and she was writing him letters, and she was writing these letters to no one though and just mailing them off. Long and behold, a soldier gets them. So years later, when she has basically pronounced that her love is dead, she gets this castle and she lives there basically like, not a widow, but she's not expected to get married or anything like that. So one day he shows up on her doorstep and is like, hey, your fiance here. I'm back. And she is shocked. So she wasn't thinking anyone was getting these letters, but it turns out someone was. And he is tall, dark, and handsome, and Scottish, and just, it's so funny. There's a lot of banter and bickering in this, and it was such a good time. I loved it so much. There was found family, and it was just so good. It's definitely one of my favorite Tessa Dares I've ever read. Next, I read Beauty Tempts the Beast by Lorraine Heath. I read this I think this is the first book that I read for the Ever After readathon, which was hosted by Books Forever After, and I gave this 5 stars. This is definitely a dark historical romance, so check out the trigger warnings before going into it. We have our heroine who has been ousted from society because her father was declared a traitor. So she was born to be high nobility, but they've been kicked out. Her father's lost his title. And then so she meets, they call him the Beast. He takes care of women in a certain profession. And this profession is obviously looked down upon by society, but he really is just trying to protect them. It's not actually what he wants to be doing, but he's trying to protect them, and he was asked to do it. And he wants to basically get these women out of the profession that they're in. And so he wants to hire our heroine to teach them how to basically navigate society in a more appropriate way. So they kind of strike a deal together to help each other out. And he pays her a lot of money, which she really needs because her and her brothers are really destitute. So this is a romance between the two of them, and it is so good. I loved it. The angst and the pining. There's just something special about Lorraine Heath's writing. It's always, I feel, a little bit more dark, a little bit more serious, a little bit more angst and emotional tug when you read her books. And this was just so good. I loved it. So yeah, I had a really good month. I had a few duds. We'll get to those. But next I read Spookily Yours by Jennifer Chipman. I think she's a newer author. This is the first book I've ever read by her. And it's like a Halloween romance. This is a witchy paranormal romance. There's this witch. She lives in this really cute, quaint town. This like a Stars Hollow met Halloween town. That's where she lives. It's so flippin' cute. She works at her sister's bakery, and she's like a barista, and she decides to take home a cat one day. She notices him on the street, and then somehow he's also at the shelter when she goes to try to adopt a cat. And she thinks that he's like her familiar, but he's actually a demon who has been cursed by a witch to be stuck in his cat form. And it's actually a romance between her and this demon cat. It's really funny. It's not like mind-blowing, groundbreaking, anything like that in terms of the writing quality, but it delivers on exactly what you want from it, which is those fall spooky season vibes. It delivers 100%, and it was very cozy and just sweet. Also very spicy. Very, very, very spicy. So all in all, I had a really fun time with this, and it just gave me those fall vibes I was kind of craving at the time. And so yeah, 4 stars. Highly recommend for spooky season. Okay, so next we have kind of a dud, and this is Romancing Mr. Bridgerton by Julie Quinn. This is the 4th book in this series, the Bridgerton series, and I read this because the Colin and Penelope season was coming out for Bridgerton, and everyone was talking about it, and it was the next book for me to read. It was also counted as a Books Forever After favorite for the readathon for my bingo board. I knew not to expect too much going in because I know a lot of people don't really love this book. I also didn't really love this book, so I haven't really enjoyed the last 2 books I've read in this series. In both of them, I found Benedict and then I found Colin both to be awful heroes. They were not very heroic. They, in fact, were both whiny, entitled, and actually pretty rude. I didn't like either of them. Colin, maybe even worse than Benedict, to be honest. I didn't like the way he treated Penelope. I actually thought he was both physically and mentally abusive towards her, and I hated it. So the reason I gave it 3 stars, though, is because in here we get a lot from Lady Danbury, and she's so much fun to read about. I also liked Penelope a lot. I also loved being back in this Bridgerton world with the family members and their relationships with each other, and the narrator, just the narrator's voice, and the segments from Lady Whistledown as well all of those together, like I feel like I can't ever give a book in this series below 3 stars, maybe 2.5, because this is definitely like feels like 2.75, but I gave it a 3. There are so many other elements about these books that have nothing to do with the romances themselves that I like so much. So the romance was a 1 star. For sure the romance was a 1 star, but I love the Bridgerton family. I love the Bridgerton world. I love Lady Whistledown. I love Lady Danbury, and all those things together brought this book up in terms of my overall enjoyment. It was at a 3 star. I know, kind of conflicting to give it a 1 star for the romance, but a 3 star overall, but those are my feelings. Okay, next I have Beverly Jenkins' Destiny's Captive. Now I think I did myself a disservice with this one because I have not read the first 2 books in the series. So I give this 4 stars. I think that it might have been a 5 star if I had read the first 2 books in the series, because the first 80 pages or so, a lot of it is actually a relationship that is like a side relationship that is developing through the whole trilogy. So this is definitely one of those few times that a historical romance should really, the series should be read in order, because there is this secondary romance that's like the mother of the 3 sons. It's her romance, and it kind of develops through the 3 books, and this is like the finale of that. So you watch the wedding and their first night together and all of that, and I was just like, who, what? Like, I wasn't attached to that, and I was like, can we get to the romance that I'm trying to read this book for? Because yeah, so the first bit of this book, I wasn't invested. I wasn't understanding what was going on. And that was just my own fault. So I didn't knock down a lot for that, because that's kind of my own fault. But at the same time, it did take me out for enjoyment. So that's why I'm giving it 4 stars. Other than that, the relationship of the actual hero and heroine of this book, I loved their relationship. It's like a pirate historical romance. Our heroine is the pirate. Our hero, he owns a ship, but he does like trading. And she steals his ship. She steals a ship so she can run guns for the Cuban Revolution. So that's what that's about. And he's gonna find her and get his ship back. And it's a relationship between them. And it's really cute. And it was really fun. And I enjoyed it a lot. Beverly Jenkins is great. I definitely need to read more from her. But 4 stars because, like I said, I couldn't be fully invested, which was, I know, my own fault. So next was another historical, and I read this too, still for the Ever After Readathon, and this was The Hunter by Kerrigan Byrne. And this is the 2nd book in the Victorian Rebels series. The first book is The Highwayman, and I gave that 4 stars, and I gave this one 4 stars. This one was super, super, super dark. So make sure you check the triggers, because I felt like it was almost not ridiculously dark, but I just felt like it was a little bit over the top. You know what I'm saying? The hero's backstory is incredibly sad. Like, he was born in prison and he watched his mother be unalived by a group of men in the most horrific way possible. So you see that on page, and it's very hard to read. And then you're going through basically all the trauma that he's gone through because of that. He is now an assassin, and he's hired to unalive our heroine, who is a famous actress. She's a single mom, and it's a relationship between them. He meets her and he's like, I can't. And so he kisses her instead. So it's their romance, and their romance was beautiful. The story was beautiful. I loved the son. Her son is like super intelligent and really cute character. There's a lot of twists and turns and action in this book too, which I really enjoyed. So my enjoyment was 4 stars. There was just times that it felt a little bit too dark, or it almost took me out of it because I was like having trouble reading it. So 4 stars for me. And then probably the biggest fail of the month for me was On a Wild Night by Stephanie Laurens. I read this book because of the step back. So this is the step back for it, which is absolutely stunning. It's one of my favorite step backs I own. I just love it so much. And so I read this for the prompt of read a book solely based on its step back. I gave this 2.5 stars. The writing was beautiful, but at the same time, I felt like nothing was happening the whole time. And this was a long, this was over 400 pages, which I think is a little bit long for a historical romance. Now, this was written about 20 years ago. So it felt a little bit more like an old school historical, but without the action, adventure, and problematic elements. So it was honestly just very flowery and slow writing. And it was just the same thing happening over and over and over again. It was constantly the heroine basically trying to manipulate the husband into marriage and him trying to out-manipulate her back, which could have been kind of fun, even though obviously it's problematic in and of itself. But it was so boring. It was so boring. So boring. So the writing was beautiful though, and there was actually a couple of funny moments, at least towards the end. And then at the end too, it became a cozy murder mystery. And that part was fun. So that's why I still give it 2.5 stars, because at the end I was like, ooh, whodunit, you know? But unfortunately it couldn't make up for the first 300 pages that dragged and dragged and dragged. Okay, so those were, I think, all the books that I read for my bingo card for the Ever After Readathon. And the next book I read was Tattered Stars, and this is actually a book that I DNF'd months ago. This is by Catherine Cowles. This is the first book in the Tattered and Torn series. I want to read more Catherine Cowles now because I DNF'd it because I just wasn't in the mood for it. I'm usually not a contemporary romance reader, but lately all of a sudden I have been in a contemporary mood. So this is actually like a romantic suspense though. Our heroine, she grew up in this culty kind of family and escaped. Well, she basically had to call the police on her father who had kidnapped someone. And her father wasn't in his right mind. These people in her family really think they're above the law. They're kind of very cult-like and scary. A lot of them are not nice people, especially the men. So they all now hate her because she's the reason her father went to prison. So she is now moved back to this little small town. It's in the western half of the US. I don't know where it was, if it was Colorado. I don't know where it was. She is now moving back and she wants to basically renovate her family's property. And now there's someone that's been kidnapping people, and then there's her family that are threatening her. So there's like suspense elements, and this is a relationship between her and the sheriff. There's a lot going on, a lot of emotional turmoil, a lot of small town stuff going on, and then there's the suspense aspects. So I was surprised I picked this back up, but that's even books I DNF that I say I don't even soft DNF. There's still always a possibility I will pick them back up because you never know when the mood's going to strike. And it did. And I still gave this 3.5 stars, which is really good considering I read the first half and then didn't pick it up for months and months, and then picked up the second half. And I was still able to continue on very well without many issues at all. I didn't have to reread or anything like that. So I definitely will be continuing on and reading more Catherine Cowles. I want to try her new series. And then I read The Wallflower Wager by Tessa Dare. And this is the third book in the Girl Meets Duke series. I gave this one 4.5 stars. This is probably my favorite book in the Girl Meets Duke series. And our heroine is a sunshiny character. Our hero is a grumpy character. She loves animals. She has all of the animals. And she is a spinster. And she basically is being threatened that she's going to have to move back home if she doesn't get her act together and try one last time to get married. This guy moves in next door and he's made himself financially. So he is not a member of the nobility. He's just very rich. He's a ruthless businessman and he's trying to flip the property. So they end up hatching a deal together for her to get rid of all of the animals and everything like that, and he's going to help her reacclimate herself to society. So their romance is really cute. I thought it was really sweet. This is definitely the most contemporary of Tessa Dare books. I feel like her books always lean very contemporary, but this one was like barely historical. But it was really sweet, and I love seeing all the characters from the previous books too. They're so sweet. The heroes were super protective of her, the heroes from the previous books, and it was really cute. Next I read, how many more books do I have here? 1, 2, 3. I have 3 more books to talk about. Okay, so the next one I read was The Pool Boy by Nikki Sloan. Like I said, I have been in a contemporary mood and I wanted to read something taboo. I read the first book in the series, which was The Doctor, and that's an age gap. This is an age gap as well, but the heroine is the older one and our hero is younger. I think he's in his early 20s, and he is her pool boy, and she has recently been divorced. She's been divorced for about a year, but she hasn't really gone into the dating pool. And it's a romance between the two of them. It is super taboo because he is actually her best friend's son. And she works in the music industry in Nashville. And it turns out that he is an amazing musician. So it's taboo also because she ends up being his manager and he is not supposed to be in a relation, like they're not supposed to be in a relationship because that's like a conflict of interest in their professional lives. So for multiple reasons, this is taboo and I gave this 5 stars. I love this so much. I don't think I've ever read a reverse age gap. I know a lot of people don't like that phrasing, but like an age gap where the heroine is the older one. I don't think I've ever read one like that before, and I loved it so much. It was super spicy, but it was also really emotional, and I loved the chemistry between these two characters. I just thought this was written really well. Nikki Sloan, I'm such a fan of hers. She's one of the few contemporary authors that I can just read repeatedly and really enjoy her works. And next I read a book that is a little bit weird for me. It's like just basically straight up contemporary. It's not like it's a taboo, it's not dark, it's not suspense. It's just contemporary romance. And this was A Deal with the Devil by Elizabeth O'Rourke. And our hero is this really rich cosmetic surgeon. So he does cosmetic surgeries, and our heroine gets hired on as a temp secretary. So she's best friends with his regular secretary, but he is gone to deal with the adoption of his new daughter, and so she is brought in to help. Now she is a struggling writer, and she's trying to finish out her book because she's already spent the money she was given initially from the book deal, and so she's struggling to finish this book. She has this ex who is a famous movie star, and he cheated on her, so she doesn't trust men. He doesn't trust women for a bunch of reasons you'll see, and he's kind of known as like a playboy, and like he's just a party animal and ruthless basically. So it's very grumpy, like they are both grumpy, and I really enjoyed this. I was very surprised. I gave this 4 stars. In the beginning, I thought it was a little bit cringy. Like I feel like that the author was going too heavily on the like, he's bad, but he's really a cinnamon roll in his heart kind of thing. Like I feel like she was kind of trying to drive that into us a lot really early on, and I thought that it was a bit cringy the way it was done. But that was only in the very beginning, and very quickly I developed an attachment to both of these characters and their relationship. Yeah, it was slow to start, but it got really good, and by the end I was so emotionally involved and so connected to these characters, and yeah, I really liked it. Okay, and then finally I have the last book that I read in May, which was Ruthless Creatures by J.T. Geisinger. This is the first book in the Queens and Monsters series. It's a mafia romance series. So our heroine's husband has been missing for 5 years, and he's now presumed dead, and she's been going through the mourning process for years and years, but having to try to deal with that. And it's really hard for her. She has this best friend who has been really helpful with getting her through all of her loss. But one day, this guy moves in next door, and he is really dangerous seeming. He's actually been sent to deal with her. So he's in the mafia, and you find out like more and more later on, but yeah, he's in the Russian mafia. So it's Bratva romance, and they immediately just hit it off and have this amazing sexual chemistry and just can't keep their hands off of each other. And just, it's very insta in that way. So he is obviously grappling with how to deal with the situation, and then there's going to be people after them, and so there's just a lot of action and adventure and heat and spice in this book. It was so much fun. I feel like if you like Mila Finelli, you will like this series. I've been looking for a new mafia romance series that has just those like ridiculous, fun, over-the-top spice. I still feel like Mila Finelli's spice is better, but it was still lots of action, lots of adventure, over the top, kind of ridiculous at times, and just so much fun. So I gave this 4 stars. I did end up continuing on in the series, and you guys will learn more about that later because that was actually in June. So there you have it. Those are all the books that I read in May. I hope you guys liked this video. Make sure to let me know down below in the comments what was your favorite book that you read in May. Don't forget to click the like button and subscribe if you haven't already. Until next time, fellow readers, keep reading and living your best life.
You felt that way, and guess you're trying to stay strong and fake a smile until I look away. But I've known you too long, it hurts to watch your blue eyes fade to gray as you fade away.